Great. Welcome everyone to our Tuesday, May 3rd, 2021 regular business meeting of the East Bay Mud Board of Directors. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and with the Governor's Executive Order N-2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. In compliance with said orders, a physical location has not been provided for this meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. The Planning and Legislative Committee, Legislative/Human Resources Committees met this morning and will report out under item 15. All directors, including myself, are participating via teleconference. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director Millen.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Patterson.
Here.
Director Young.
Here.
President Linney.
Here. If everyone will please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, pledge allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic,
For which it stands,
one nation, under
nation,
God,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty
indivisible,
and
with justice for all. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Public comment, if members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda. I'm sorry, we have a presentation first before I jump to that. Clifford.
Yep, thank you, President Linney. So the National Association of Clean Water Agencies awarded the San Francisco Bay Regional Monitoring Program, the RMP, its National Environmental Achievement Award in the Watershed Collaboration category. The Environmental Achievement Award recognizes how the program's collaborative approach benefits the environment by defining, investigating, and providing the critical information decision makers need to proactively protect water quality in the San Francisco Bay, benefits dischargers by generating robust and accurate data, and benefits the community by utilizing cost-effective methods to protect the environment while minimizing the financial burden of ratepayers. The RMP is an exceptional example of regional collaboration among many diverse stakeholders, including regulators, scientists, dischargers, and non-governmental organizations, all with a common goal of protecting the San Francisco Bay. For over 25 years, through science and technological development, the RMP has informed decision-making to best manage our critically important ecosystem. Detailed investigations have been performed for a range of contaminants and environmental issues, most recently related to nutrients, microplastics, and per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. The RMP is truly one of a kind and serves as a model of collaboration nationwide. The district is proud to be part of this regional collaborative program, now being recognized by this prestigious national award. I'd like to thank and congratulate the following team members for their contribution to the RMP. Eva Agus, Associate Civil Engineer, Sue Berg, Laboratory Scientist, Artem Dyachenko, Laboratory Supervisor, James Hake, Associate Civil Engineer, Nicholas Klump, Senior Wastewater Control Inspector, Melissa Lash, Research Microbiologist, Robert Molina, Laboratory Chemist 2, Daniel Perillo, Wastewater Plant Operator 1, Yun Shang, Manager of Laboratory and Technical Services, Cynthia Suhu, Laboratory Technician 3, and Zachary Wu, Wastewater Control Inspector 2. Please join me in congratulating staff for a job well done.
Thank you, Clifford, for presenting that. I would just say that the fact that there were so many people on staff who collaborated in getting us the collaboration award or earning the collaboration award is just one more sign of the great work that we do. And on behalf of the board of directors, a special thanks to everyone who made that possible. Not just the award, but the actual work that we accomplished that way. To get it done. We're very proud of you and East Bay Mud for making that happen. I wish I was here to shake your hands. No announcements required from closed session. we're now on the public comment period. This is the period for people who want to make comments for items that are not on our agenda at all. Otherwise, save those for agenda items. Do use the raise your hand feature in Zoom to indicate if you want to make a comment to the board of directors at this point in time. Comments on agenda items will be heard when the item is up for consideration. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. You will get 3 minutes to speak, and the secretary will track time and inform each speaker when your allocated time has concluded. Robin, do we have any speakers today?
We currently have 3 hands raised, so I will confirm if they're speaking on non-agenda items or not. Hold on. Yvette Rivera, are you planning to speak on an agenda or non-agenda item?
Non-agenda item.
Okay, you'll have,
Non-agenda item.
okay, you'll have 3 minutes and your time will start now.
Thank you. Upon reviewing the last board meeting minutes, I noticed that the subject of the East Bay MUD's integrated pest management policy came up. 2 years ago, I spoke on this issue, and today I'm here to raise the same matter of public concern that I brought up then. Here at East Bay MUD, we have 2 out of 3 divisions that allow pesticide applicators to apply chemicals like Roundup, Rodeo, Garlon, just to name a few, without a pesticide license or certificate. A couple of years ago, I informed this board that East Bay Regional Parks Department long ago adopted the best management practice of having all of their herbicide applicators licensed through the state of California. East Bay MUD unfortunately continues to make these licenses through the state optional for 2 out of 3 of its divisions, despite my recommendation and the recommendation of an independent contractor hired by East Bay MUD. The 2 largest divisions at East Bay MUD that do not make this license a requirement covers territories with the highest population of ratepayers, schools, hospitals, and emergency services. And employees that apply herbicides without this license continue to mix and apply herbicides at East Bay MUD properties in Contra Costa County and Alameda County until the district changes its practice. As a concerned ratepayer, I hope this esteemed board will consider making pesticide licenses and certificates a requirement for every East Bay MUD employee that applies herbicides and any chemical at district facilities to control weeds to manage vegetation for fire season. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Yvette.
Okay, next up is Joe Pangilinan. Are you speaking on an agenda or non-agenda item?
Agenda item, item number 8.
Okay, we'll hold you for number 8.
Okay.
Thank you. And let's see, next up, we'll check with Eric Larson. Are you speaking of an agenda or non-agenda item?
Good afternoon. This is Eric Larson, President, AFSCME Local 444. I'd like to provide comments on agenda item number 7.
Thank you.
All right. Let me just get my agenda back here. All right, so we have any other speakers on items not agendized?
No, those are the only 2.
So why don't we pull items 7 and 8? Do I have a motion for the other items?
This is John. I'll move items 1 through 6.
Okay. Second, somebody?
I'll second it.
All right, Frank, thank you. Motion by John, by Director Coleman, seconded by Director Mellon on items 1 through 6 on our consent calendar. Yes, that's correct. So can we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yeah.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, let's take up item 7. This is authorizing amendments to agreements for paving and other related services.
Do we want to hear from Eric first?
Yeah, Eric, why don't we hear from you first? I know this was an item that was on the planning committee as well this morning.
Eric,
you.
you should be allowed to speak now, and your time will start now.
Thank you. This is Eric Larson, President, AFSCME Local 444. Good afternoon, Board of Directors and staff. I am objecting to the contract award, proposed contract award of $3.5 million for paving services. In January of 2020, before the COVID pandemic, management requested authorization for $1.25 million for contracting out additional paving services, more than double the previous year's spending. Then in August of 2020, management returned and requested an increase to $4 million, purportedly due to a backlog created by lost productivity due to the COVID pandemic. AFSCME Local 444 objected in August 2020, proposing an alternative of hiring an additional limited term crew to address the backlog. Management contended that it would take 3 months for recruitment to provide enough staff to fill a LT crew. Now, 9 months later, we're at the same place. Management is asking for $3.5 million contracting out award, and we currently have one entire crew's worth of funded vacancies. 9 months later, recruitment has got a list established in order to fill those crews, and could fill one additional limited term crew to address the backlog. A limited term crew by definition is 2 years or less. So we will release that crew once the backlog is addressed. Alternatively, if the need if there's found to be a need to retain the crew for additional work, that limited term crew could be extended. Doing so is budget neutral. One crew is 8 people. If you paid each of those people $200,000 each, which is well above their salary, including the roll-up cost, that's only $1.6 million. By management use rule of thumb, one crew can address $2 million worth of paving work. Opening limited term positions gives an opportunity for people to get a foot in the door for good jobs with good benefits at East Bay MUD, and creates more entry-level jobs at East Bay MUD, and is the single biggest thing we can do to lower barriers of entries for underrepresented members of our community. And I would like you to direct you to the last page of the agenda item number 7 information document that defines the alternatives. The alternative to perform work with district staff. Management cites that this alternative is not recommended because the paving backlog will grow without additional resources.
Eric, your
Quoting
time has
management statement,
expired.
the paving backlog will grow without additional resources. We're simply asking for those additional resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Anyone else to speak on this topic?
No other hands are raised, or a board member, sorry.
Director Young?
Yeah, I just would report that the planning committee heard this item and recognizes the, I think it's fair to say, recognizes the constraints that exist. This is an is what it is situation that is a lot of which I think we all agree is pandemic outfall, and that we simply don't have the ability to do what Eric is suggesting without further, we know that, the hiring of the additional crew is apace, should be dealt with in the next month or so, to move things on time, but there's just not a way to do, the temporary, hire, in such a way that it could alleviate the backlog. And so, the committee did, encourage staff to look towards the long term of what we need to do in terms of paving, but approved, the, staff's recommendation, unanimously.
Director Mellon?
I just wanted to say the same thing I said there in the meeting. I've been getting an enormous amount of lobbying from the trade unions that East Bay Mud is doing too much work and that it should be more contracting out than what we're doing. So I find myself caught between a rock and a hard spot here in terms of, are we doing too much? Are we doing too little? If you listen to both sides of it, there's nobody here to satisfy. That's why I felt comfortable voting on going forward as we are.
And I'll add, President Linney, so, we did discuss in the committee, a lot of the vacancies we're seeing right now are pandemic related, either staff that haven't had to be quarantined or just the difficulty of recruiting during COVID. When you look at our historical paving, we are doing a similar amount this past year that we've done with all district forces a few years ago. But we are adding more mileage of pipe as time goes on. And so what we told the committee is, as we move forward in the next budget cycle, we will watch and see if, our existing forces can't maintain that baseline of resources going forward. But right now, the data doesn't support bringing on another crew, except for the fact that we have vacancies largely due to the pandemic today.
And what's the trade-offs between having a temporary crew for using the catch-up period and just contracting them out?
So go ahead.
What we heard in the planning committee is a couple things. One is that it still takes time to bring those temporary folks on board, and that in fact that the temporaries that we tried to hire, 2 out of 3 actually declined when they were on the list. And that doesn't mean there aren't issues associated with what we're doing to recruit temporary crews. And if we anticipate that we would need more limited term workforce, then there needs to be the lead time and advance time to do that. But right now we've got a backlog where the cities are complaining and others are complaining about temporary, asphalt in the street that's been there for, 9 months. So it's not an ideal situation, but I'm more interested in making sure we don't hire people that we end up laying off, that the temporary solution doesn't appear to be viable, temporary workforce solution doesn't appear to be viable to address what sounds like a one-time backlog, and that we need to balance it off with contracting out. Would have been better not to have to be in this situation, of course, but we are. So that's why I felt comfortable with approving it.
And is so I'm reading it's aggregate amount 3.5 million, but not to exceed 7.5 million. Is this this amount is meant to cover a period that will catch us up back to our normal, if you will?
Yeah, this amount is for the next 12 months. And again, the plan is to eliminate a large part of the backlog and then get our those 11 positions are vacant back up and running so that we can operate under full staffing.
So we still have 11 positions that are vacant.
That are vacant that we're actively recruiting right now, and they're in various stages of recruitment right now. And as Director Young indicated, I mean, just adding crews, temporary crews is very difficult in today's market right now. As the presenter shared in the committee, we offer positions, and people don't want temporary positions, and two out of three had declined positions. So it's not quite ideal to take a temporary position for a lot of people.
Andy, you have your hand up.
I did. I am very informed by what Director Young presented on behalf of the Planning Committee, so that answers the questions that I had, as well as what our General Manager reported. So my view on this is that we obviously should be avoiding contracting out, and only to be contracting out when we're unable to perform the services in-house. And that would be of interest if this were, to the extent that we have any continuing work that needs to occur beyond this one-time backlog. So I would be interested in some continuing monitoring of what our long-term plans are, and would hope that that can be addressed at the Planning Committee sometime over the next 6 to 8 months, so that we can initiate new recruitments if that is needed for long-term planning needs for stable positions.
Okay. And Clifford, the fact that we've increased our pipe crews, the rebuild crews, have we also appropriately increased the amount of paving to keep up with that? Or is that part of what you need to still assess?
No, we haven't added paving crews, but what we have added is new types of equipment that makes staff more efficient. So, and what we shared was, even though we're adding more pipeline, the amount of work that's dedicated, paving work that's dedicated to pipeline is, less than half of what we use paving services for all other types of work, like repairing the streets after main breaks. And so, there's a combination of factors. As we add more miles of pipe, that will obviously take more resources to pave. But as we put more pipe in, our goal, of course, is to have fewer main breaks. Main breaks take more time because of the mobilization and demobilization. And the data shows right now that our crews, the 8 crews that we have right now, have in the past put in the same amount of square feet of pavement that we have last year, where we did have to contract out more because we were short resources. So the long and short of it is, as Director Katz and Director Young indicated, is we're going to look at the data, and as we add more, if it makes sense that we're falling behind and we can do more with district forces, then we'll come back with a recommendation for staffing. The data right now just doesn't support that. What the data supports right now is the vacancies are what's hurting us and causing the backlog. And the vacancies are largely due to the pandemic.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Do we have a motion on this?
I would so move.
All right, motion by Director Mellon, seconded by,
Don Coleman.
okay. We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Millen,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, motion passes unanimously on item, my agenda here, that was item 7. We're now on to item 8.
And we had one public comment. Do you want to take that first?
Go ahead and take that.
Okay, Joe Pangilinan, you should have permission to speak.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
you'll have 3 minutes and your time starts now.
Hello, President Lenny, Board of Directors, General Manager Chan, staff, and members of the public. My name is Joe Pangelinan, and I am the Chief Steward of ASME Local 444. I am also an East Bay MUD electrical technician. I started here at the district in 2005 as an entry-level electrical worker 1. At that time when I applied, the number of applicants was enormous and very diverse. I remember talking to several other people at the Oakland Marriott prior to taking the entry-level test. There was a wide range of people ready to start a career here at East Bay MUD. High school graduates, to people looking to get out of the corporate world and work with their hands in the trades. Looking at the history of the East Bay MUD electric shop, it was most diverse when the district hired at the worker 1 level. In 2006, there were 4 women in the electric shop alone. Hiring at the entry level absolutely provided a pathway for those who did not already have experience in the trade. For the past several years, the district has only hired at the worker 2 or journey level, which means you must already have experience or training in the trade to apply for the job. The result of this practice is the limiting of the diversity in the pool of applicants. District is seeing more people applying who will have to commute great distances to the job and less from the surrounding communities. Per the Affirmative Action Program report, electrical and structural maintenance positions here at East Bay MUD have a minority availability of 52.5%, yet incumbency is only at 28%. A return to hiring entry-level positions at the district will assist in reaching 2 goals. It will help the district in hiring a diverse workforce, and it will be part of investing in pipes and people, which will benefit our local communities by providing steady jobs, training, and a boost to the economy, as Vice President Kamala Harris stated in her recent visit to the Bay Area. In closing, I would like to say that I am a living example of this, since I am a Pacific Islander and I live and work in the service area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And maybe
Any other comments?
maybe I'll just
Don?
add, President Lenny, just on this. And we also heard from the committee, and you have my commitment to look at making changes. You've seen some of the changes that we're making right now. We're going to look at what positions we hire, including at the worker 1, but also coupled with all that, we have to look at the organizational culture, not just who does the hiring, but the culture of the staff itself, and how that supports the people who are coming in of different races and nationalities and genders. So there's a lot of work to do, but you have my commitment and the commitment of the senior management team to, I think, as Director McIntosh noted, make some more dramatic changes and not see more of the same year to year.
President Lenny, we did hear this in the Ledge HR committee meeting this morning, and the committee on a 3-0 vote voted to support the recommended action.
And Clifford, thank you for that commitment.
And I will move item 8.
Second.
All right, moved by Director Coleman, seconded by Director McIntosh. Let's have a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, that completes our consent calendar. We're now on to the public hearing with regards to our draft urban water management plan of 2030 and our draft water shortage contingency plan of 2030. Do we have a presentation for this?
We do. So Lena Tam, Manager of Water Resources Planning, is going to provide a brief presentation for today's public hearing on our draft urban water management plan and draft water shortage contingency plan. Lena?
Good afternoon, President Linney and board members. The district's urban water management plan and water shortage contingency plan. If I can have the presentation, please, Janetta.
Yes, she's pulling it up. Hold on, Lena.
Okay, so these plans serve as the legal and technical water management foundation that integrates the land use planning of the cities and the counties that we serve with the district's water supply infrastructure and our demand management programs like conservation and recycling, as well as the statewide issues like climate change and the new Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan standards. I am hoping to
Hang on 1 minute, Lena. I apologize for having some issues.
Lena, you see this presentation, Lena?
I do, thank you. Could we have the next slide, please? So at today's, thank you. At today's public hearing, we'll describe briefly the urban water management plan and the water shortage contingency plan, some of the changes that were made from the prior update, and then talk a little bit about the timeline. Both the urban plan and the water shortage contingency plan describes how the district meets its future and water supply needs and how we adaptively manage for future uncertainties. These plans are updated every 5 years and they comply with the new enacted legislation since the last update. The district had sponsored legislation back in 1983, almost 38 years ago, and there's been about 27 different legislative amendments that have occurred. And the plan requires a public review process, including today's public hearing. These plans incorporate the district strategy to ensure that there's an adequate water supply now and into the future. The cities and the counties that we serve rely on the district's urban plan to assess the adequacy of water supply and particularly for new development projects. And in order for the district to be eligible for state grants and funding, we have to have an adopted and certified urban plan. The state of California also uses our urban plan in their California Water Resiliency Plan. And we also describe in our urban plan any upcoming water supply projects and initiatives to improve resiliency through a diversified portfolio. This year's updates will incorporate the lessons we learned from the prior drought, highlighting the uncertainty that is inherent in long-term water supply planning. Because of this uncertainty, we evaluated a range of water supply and demand scenarios that guide some of our decisions during water shortages. But also the water shortage contingency plan outlines how we will respond not only to a drought, but any catastrophe that interrupts our water supply, such as the PSPS regional power outage events, earthquakes, or other disasters that impact our system. Next, please. A draft of both the urban plan and water shortage contingency plan were distributed to the land use agencies and the community groups in our service area, along with sending copies to the state library and the public libraries on April 7th. It is also available online at the district's website. We held a virtual public comment meeting on April 29th, and we received about, so far, 4 written comments that were due tomorrow. There has been 2 notable changes with this update, and one is on the methodology associated with the water supply and demand assessments. And as we've discussed in prior board meetings, our drought management program guidelines. Next, please. First, on the water supply and demand assessment, we evaluated a range of scenarios to ensure long-term water supply reliability in uncertain times over the next 25 to 30 years. This is a different approach than what we've done in the past, where we predict and we plan for a single outcome, like our need for water. With this update, we plan for a wide range of potential futures, and we develop a more resilient suite of responses that the district can take to adapt to changing conditions. So using complex modeling analysis, we looked at different potential scenarios based on region-specific variables. We considered the flow requirements that we're obligated to provide for ecosystem protection, as well as the obligations set forth by regulatory agencies and the contracts and the agreements that we have with a number of agencies. Some of the primary drivers in the analysis include the water use in the Upper McElmy watershed in Calaveras and Amador County in particular, the CVP allocations from the Bureau, the triggers and the criteria for initiating water shortages, and the projected demands. So on this graphic, the baseline condition for the urban plan represents our current operations, that's in blue, using East Bay MUD's historic 94-year hydrologic period. We assessed the historic water supply against future demands that were projected in our 2050 demand study. We also assumed that East Bay MUD would be getting its full allocation that we request from the Bureau under our CVP contract. Under the high demand scenario, which is the maroon bar, we looked at an upper bound limit for each planning level of development. Because there is an inherent level of uncertainty in the prediction of future water demands, we looked at a higher range that may be possible. And then sandwiched in between the brown, under the extreme drought conditions, we focused on the lack of dry year water by assuming that our CVP allocations in the second and the third year of the drought would be 25%. This scenario was plausible since the district did experience this 75% cutback in our CVP allocations in the last drought. So we found that the high demand scenario substantially increases the district's water supply needs, because the increased water needs obviously correlates to a supply deficit and an increased water shortage. The extreme drought scenario did not cause quite the significant change that we had thought, because the CVP water was taken earlier in the first year of the drought, and it mitigates the impact of reduced allocations in the second and the third year of the drought. Next, please. The second notable change is our drought management program guidelines, which is contained in our water shortage contingency plan. It establishes the trigger points for voluntary and mandatory rationing based upon reservoir levels. The objective is to preserve the district's water storage by combining early conservation actions with bringing in supplemental supplies. In 2018, there was new legislation that required replacing this analysis with several prescriptive elements. Basically, the drought stages were expanded in the legislation. With this update, we integrated the requirements of the legislation as well as the lessons that we learned from the last drought when we experienced reduced allocations in our CVP deliveries, as well as curtailments by the state, which stopped our diversions in the McElmy River. So the revisions that we're proposing to the drought management guidelines provides discretion for the district in securing our CVP supplies and other supplemental supplies when total system storage reaches 475,000 acre feet, accompanied by voluntary rationing. Then we move to mandatory rationing as our storage levels get depleted. There are specific incentives and penalties in reducing water use that are included in our water shortage contingency plan that are tied to these specific drought stages, such as when we implement our drought surcharge and when the ordinances related to excessive use would be activated. Next, please. As one of the lessons learned from the last drought, this table illustrates that because our CVP allocations were reduced in 2015, the district was forced to purchase transfer water at a significantly higher cost than just by using more of its CVP allocation in the previous year. As you can see, we went from $75 to as high as $775 an acre foot, almost a tenfold increase. Next, please. So the drought stages were also developed to consider the reduced allocation from the CVP deliveries. In our analysis, we used the current level of demand for both our CVP deliveries and customer rationing. And these bars illustrates the effect of taking Freeport water in the first stage of a drought. It shows that earlier deliveries of supplemental supplies would increase the frequency of operating the Freeport facility by about 2 years out of 94 years in our hydrologic period. But it doesn't change how often our customers would need to be rationed or the amount of fishery flows in any other year type. Next, please. So to summarize, by taking deliveries earlier in the drought of our CVP contract water, we reduced the risk that there would be further cutbacks in subsequent years, which could force us to purchase water at a higher cost. It also reduces the risk to our ability to maintain cold water at Pardee and Comanche, or impose more draconian water rationing in subsequent years. At this point, I'll turn it over to the general manager to give a status report on how this is playing out this year with our plans to take delivery of our CVP water, while the Bureau has given us so far a 55% allocation.
Yeah, just a quick update. Yesterday, I think we've all seen that the governor expanded the drought emergency, which now includes 41 counties, including Alameda, Contra Costa, and the upcountry counties. And much of the snow that we had up in the mountains really is going straight into the ground and not into the McElmy River and to Pardee Reservoir. So 2 weeks ago, we shared with you that our median projection was at 490,000 acre feet for the end of system storage, end of year storage. And our dry scenario, that is the 90th percentile, was around 465,000 acre feet. Our new median projection is 430,000 acre feet for the end of year storage. And then the dry, the 90th percentile, it varies, but it's around 415,000 acre feet. Understanding that, there is some, error in these estimates. So, it could be plus or minus any of these numbers. So I just wanted to update the board where we are today versus 2 weeks ago when we updated you on our water supply situation.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. So to close out this public hearing, this timeline shows where we are now, and our next step is to respond to the comments that we received and prepare a final urban plan for the board's consideration on June 22nd. If it's adopted, it'll be submitted to the Department of Water Resources before the statutory deadline. And last slide, please. I'm happy to answer any questions before you close the public hearing.
All right, can we have everyone, Marguerite, you want to start?
Yeah, just one question, Lena. Have we been getting comments or no?
We've gotten 4 comments. One comment related to asking about the district's desal plan. The second comment was asking about our plans to improve storage reliability. The third asked about our plans to increase metering, like through our advanced metering infrastructure, because these customers want to see in real time rather than wait for 2 months with our billing cycle to see how they their conservation. So those are the type of comments we've been getting, and we plan to respond to them before we finalize the urban plan.
All right, Director Coleman? You have your hand up?
Yeah, thank you. Lena, do we have 4 comments is not many, sort of going off what Marguerite was going from. Do we have latitude and time to extend the comment period, or do we not, because we have to get back to DWR?
We have some latitude, but the important deadline obviously is we need to get a final draft submitted by July 1st. Okay,
that was a question. I mean, again, maybe we wouldn't get any more comments, who knows, but 4 is not many in the whole scheme of things for once every 5-year process. I was befuddled, maybe somebody can help me, with the governor's declaration of a major drought, which we're in 41 counties now. Why was Marin County excluded? And they're the ones who are in one of the most serious situations in the Bay Area of any, much worse than we are in Alameda and Contra Costa, but Marin County was not designated as one of the counties.
I think they were designated 2 weeks ago, weren't they?
No, it was Sonoma. I thought Sonoma and Mendocino, but maybe they were. I don't know.
The source of water for Marin County, obviously, is the reservoirs in Sonoma County. So I think the declaration in Sonoma County applied to them.
Yeah, I know they get part of their water from the Russian River. Some parts of Marin do. There's 2 main water districts. And maybe this is not for this point here, but we didn't have the newspaper the day after our board meeting, last board meeting, I read how Marin County wanted to put a pipeline across the San Rafael Bridge, and it wasn't raised at our meeting. So I don't know if they had talked with staff or not. I've had a number of inquiries about that and did a little bit of checking and figured, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be our water. It would be maybe using Freeport and CVP water coming into our system, but we need to have a response. I want to make sure I'm speaking correctly. When I'm asked the question, people are saying, are they going to get our water? And the answer is no, but we would be wheeling the water through our system, yes. But we need to have I would like to have something to be able to tell people definitively in response to that.
You're correct, Director Coleman, and I see Mike Tognolini is online, and actually staff from Marin Municipal did ask our Water and Natural Resources Director. Mike?
Yeah. So we have met with Marin, and there's a lot of things that they need to do in advance before a project like this can move forward. And I think what we can do, Director Coleman, is we can provide all the board members some speaking points, but at this point in time, after discussing with Marin, the ball is really in their court to move a number of fairly significant items forward before this can move forward. We have engaged them, and we are willing to continue discussions. They're just not at that point right now in their analysis, but we can provide some speaking points for all the board members if you're asked.
Thank you. But is it fair to say, it might be inaccurate, this was based on my knowledge of being on the board for a bit and just doing a little bit of quick research, that we would be only wheeling water to them if they did it, and it would not be any of our current water supply that we have, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you so much.
Director Mellon?
I'm under, maybe I missed it, but I'm under the impression that pipe that we ran across the Richmond San Rafael Bridge years ago is gone.
Yeah, it's
You're
a bike
correct.
lane now.
And so that's one of the little details that's going to have to be worked out, isn't it?
That is,
That's
yeah,
correct.
one of the many little details they have to work through.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Comments from the board?
I think it would be important to be taking cost allocation into consideration. I think with looking at what the proposed new triggers for a stage 1 drought would be, and that associated consequence of using Freeport more, that I think changes the way we might look at Freeport, the costs of using Freeport for our customers. So we should, I think, as a agency management rates and budget standpoint, review that transition in the context of what it means for what's equitable and what's fair in terms of the reason, the cost causation of that increased usage of Freeport. So I still remain very curious if this is the best move to make, but I do see the rationale better at this point, that it could avoid rationing or help us maintain the current frequency of rationing, but it does increase the use of Freeport, and that does have a cost for our customers, and we should make sure that our rates and charges reflect a fair allocation of those costs at the appropriate time, which is not necessarily in the water management plan, but the water management plan is where we would make the decision about our guidelines for how we manage the drought and using our supplemental supply.
Director Coleman?
Thanks. Teeing off, Marguerite and Andy raised some good things that part I was going to raise. I know that when we've let other agencies, or our understanding is when other agencies use Freeport, basically it's revenue neutral. We're not generating any income off of it. The cost to operation they absorb. Is it unreasonable to have a minimal tolling fee to help deal with the question Andy raised? So when we need to use it, it's gone into a fund that if others are using Freeport, they're paying, and we're getting basically we made the investment, our ratepayers pay for it. And so why can't we look at having whatever percent minimal, not being outrageous, of whatever that cost would be going to our operations, so when we need to use it, we can then take the money from a dedicated fund or whatever to help cover our costs when we use Freeport.
Yeah, I'll let Mike Tognelli talk about the work that we've done to look at our cost to wheel water through our system.
Sure, Director Coleman, we have evaluated the cost of wheeling water through our system from many different perspectives on multiple projects, from desal to Los Vaqueros, and certainly the board has adopted principles around wheeling water through Freeport. The simple answer to the question is that we would anticipate that in any situation where we're wheeling water for another agency, they would pay all of the additional costs, all of the power, all the additional operation costs, but they also would pay for their share of essentially wear and tear costs. So a contribution toward the capital investment that East Bay MUD has already made. So that additional revenue is something that if we were not wheeling water, we would not receive. So there is a revenue benefit to East Bay MUD to offset some of the capital that we've already invested in Freeport if we were to wheel for another entity.
Great, thank you.
Any other board comments? Is there any public comments, Robin?
There's no hands raised for public comment.
All right, well, this was a public hearing. There's not a decision at this point. This was an opportunity for the public to be informed about this, as well as the board. So there are no further comments. The public hearing is now closed. We'll now move to determination and discussion. starting with the legislative update. Marlene, there you are.
It's like that, magic.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. We have a written ledge report for you today that has 4 bills in it. And then after that, if you are up for it, I'd like to give you a brief state update as well as a federal update. Starting with the legislative report, 2 of these bills are bills that we're bringing back. They're bills that we talked about at the last board meeting. There was a question raised about whether or not Buy America mandates were considered as part of the zero electric vehicle approach. And I have an answer to that question. What I'd like to do is take the bills in order. The first zero electric vehicle bill is second, so I'll get into that question with that bill. So with that, the first bill up is AB 315, which is Assemblymember Stone's bill. And the intent of this bill is to encourage more habitat restoration. And what this bill would do is provide limited liability protections for private property owners when habitat restoration projects are happening on their land. And there are some criteria that must be met for a landowner to qualify. The criteria are, first, the project has to be funded by state or federal funds, either partially or in full. Secondly, the project has to be appropriately permitted. And thirdly, the property owner cannot directly or indirectly undertake any of the restoration work. We were looking at this and are looking at this predominantly in the context of the work that the district does on the McCollum River, looking out towards the future, that this will potentially make more sites available for habitat restoration, both now and also potentially in the context of the state's water quality control plan implementation. So we are recommending a support position on this measure.
Just so we dealt with this, all 4 items actually in the Ledge Committee report, ledge meeting this morning, and all the committee is in support of all 4 bills. So maybe we just want to go through all of them, Marlene, and then do them as a whole.
Not hearing any objection. Let's try that out.
Okay. All right. So next bill is AB 1110. This is one of the 2 zero emission vehicle bills. Just a refresher, this one is focused on facilitating fleet conversion to zero electric vehicles for public agencies. So the approach this bill takes would be through the Department of General Services. It would establish a Clean Fleet Accelerator office in the governor's office. It would also establish an ombuds person to coordinate the program. It would make zero emission fleet vehicles available through the Department of General Services bulk purchasing process. And it would also provide financial assistance for purchasers of those vehicles that qualify. And the answer to the Buy America, we checked on this bill and also the second bill, which is at the end of the packet. That's not a policy objective for either author. We dug around a little bit at the state level, and it does not seem to be a direction the state is focused on right now. But I will note that on this bill, the ombuds person, in developing the criteria for the fleet process, there's some considerations that need to be made with regard to the manufacturers. And those considerations are that they must demonstrate a pattern of activity showing performance in high road labor and job creation within California, providing hiring and training operations to residents in disadvantaged communities, and a demonstrated commitment to racial and gender equity. So that at least are the criteria for this bill. I would also note that as agencies make selections, if they opt to use this process, they would be free to pick among the manufacturers on the list and could consider that in their selections as well. We are still recommending a support on this measure because our perspective is that assistance is needed to make this transition. And so we would like to see the state do what it can to promote that transition for both public and privates. Ready for the next one?
I think so.
Okay, AB 1371, this is Assemblymember Friedman's bill. This is taking another step to reduce plastic waste. This gets to packaging. I wouldn't be surprised if this was the result of the pandemic comfort buying, where a lot of people were doing online ordering and getting packages in the mail that has a lot of plastic packaging. What this bill would do is phase out the use of plastic packaging in those home delivered products, specifically plastic film, shipping envelopes, and just the fillers that are used in the products. And during the transition period, they would require online retailers that have a physical brick and mortar presence in the state, and also those retailers that have locker pickups like Amazon, to have a physical place for consumers to bring that plastic packaging to leave so it can be recycled. For those retailers that don't have those physical presence, it would require them to have a mechanism for customers to send the material back to the manufacturer so that they could do the recycling. And then lastly, it would prohibit the use of the polystyrene packaging completely. Because that is not recyclable. We think this is consistent with prior positions we've taken to reduce plastic waste. Most notably was the position the district took on the plastic bag, single-use plastic bag ban. So we are recommending a support on this one.
Marlene,
Okay,
it seems like, you know, the real target of this would be Amazon, since they do most of the online ordering and mailing and stuff, and they only have a locker presence. Do the take back, is it required to be convenient and distributed in a significant number of places, or how does that kind of part work?
it's, you know, I'd have to pull the bill up to see the exact language. It doesn't specify a number. They really get to the size of the retailer on how they are asking. Let me see what I can pull on what their specific requirements are. Bear with me for just a sec. Well, now things are freezing up. I apologize for the delay here.
It's more a matter of information. It's not whether I'm going to vote for it or not. So that's okay. We can move on.
I can certainly drop you a note with that info if that's helpful.
Sure. Let's go ahead and continue.
Okay. All right. The last bill is SB 372, and this is the second of the 2 zero emission vehicle bills. And this is for all fleets. So this isn't limited to public agencies. And this would administer its program through CARB and also make financing tools available through the California Pollution Control Financing Authority. This also does not have a Buy America mandate, but for the same reasons of the previous bill facilitating this transition, we're recommending a support.
All right, was there a report from the, oh, yeah, John, you already said the.
I did, yeah, we all voted on all 4 bills, a 3-0 vote.
All right, we have a motion.
I'll move the 4 bills that were Marlene introduced.
Second.
All right, motion by Director Coleman, seconded by Director McIntosh for approval of all of the staff recommendations on the bills today. Can we have a roll call vote then?
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Millen,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right.
And-
You got an update?
I do, and President Lenny, I have an answer. For the Amazon, a bin would have to be at the locker locations. Under the theory, if you're picking it up at the locker, then you would have a bin there.
Thank you.
Okay, update. Starting at the state level, there is quite a bit happening right now. The governor is doing one or more press releases each day leading up to the May revised release, which is going to be on the 14th. And the budget situation is very different today than it was when he did his initial proposal in January. In January, we were looking at a $15 billion surplus. Now we're looking at close to a $76 billion surplus. And they're viewing it all as to be used for one-time spending. To put that number in context, that's almost half of the general fund spending in a given year. So it's quite a bit. We've seen announcements on various topics this week, but the one I wanted to focus on is his announcement and also a separate announcement by the Senate last week on approaches to deal with utility arrearages. Going to the federal side for just a second, the two most recent COVID relief bills had money in them nationwide for arrearages. The federal total was about $1.1 billion nationwide. California would stand to see about 100 million of that. What the Senate released last week in their drought package was $1 billion proposal just for utility arrearages. So federal COVID relief, $1 billion nationwide, Senate package, $1 billion just in California. And that would be using the federal COVID relief money that's gone to the state that's not earmarked. What Governor Newsom proposes is $1 billion for water utility relief, and then $1 billion for electric utility relief. So he's got $2 billion in arrearage relief. We don't have detail right now on what this really means. And some examples. Do these relief funds apply to public agencies only, or do they also include private? Is wastewater in or not? And how would it be allocated? When we were talking a few months ago, the discussions were leaning towards preferentially distributing money to those agencies that were in trouble financially before COVID hit. With this much money proposed, it feels a lot more likely that East Bay MUD ratepayers would see some relief from these packages. What happens next is that the big three need to talk. They are talking and come up with a final approach, and with that, budget trailer bills. We've been working on this issue with staff since last year, trying to get a relief package that would flow to East Bay MUD customers at the federal level and at the state level. We're continuing to have the conversations. We're continuing to push, particularly with those that can influence the budget committee and the committees themselves. It's moving fairly quickly, but the budget deadline is June 15th. So there's about a month here. We'll be working on a deal, at least on the fiscal side. Trailer bill timing is still uncertain. The trailer bills could happen between after the budget deal is struck in June, or they could come later. We just don't know yet. But I don't appear excited, but I'm very excited. This is great news, and we're going to keep working on it. I see a hand.
Yeah, so my question, I mean, the governor's announcement yesterday was very targeted towards people getting help and with their utility bills, and sort of what I've heard you saying is that go to those utilities that were in trouble before. So I guess I'm a little confused about, because there's a couple ways to do this. There's this won't happen, but one could say, every water utility submits the amounts that it got in arrearages, and it kind of gets written off and everybody gets a clean slate. That would be a way to take care of it, right? I know there's more water debt than that, so that wouldn't quite work, but maybe it's a percentage, or I don't know. Another option would be that individuals need to apply, right? To get their back bills paid. I mean, I'm just wondering whether you have any kind of crystal ball about how you're thinking this relief would actually be distributed, so that it actually really does end up paying off utility debt that people have versus not. I mean, the mechanics of it seem fairly complicated.
It can be, and I apologize. I think I created confusion a minute ago. The discussions before these $1 billion proposals came out were really around that 100 million, and the theory that that's not nearly enough to handle the debt. The state board did a kind of the back of the envelope survey last fall. They came up with a number of 1 billion. It's a rough number, but it's at least a ballpark, right? So if the state was going to get 10% of that, there was a voice out there saying, or some voices saying, let's take that limited amount of money and just help those in the worst trouble. So it's sort of a help the utility instead of help the people that are in trouble approach. And you can help the people two ways. You can do the LIHEAP model, where people have to apply, they go through a third-party provider, then the money flows to the utilities through that third-party entity to clear that debt. There's another model that's being talked about, which is more along the lines of similar to what you were saying, Director Young, of utilities applying and the money coming straight to the utilities, but they have to address the debt of those individuals that have it. And then they would have to do a report back to the state. So there's those two models. I'm not really sure where they're going to land right now. It feels like they want efficient and they want it to get out quickly. One key difference between what the Senate's drought package is, which has some other things in it, is that they want it out quickly. They're saying they want no regrets and they want to move it quickly. So they're trying to do non-controversial and maximize the benefit of that money. On the governor's proposal, it's really unclear to me right now if the billion or the 2 billion, however you want to talk about it, is part of a sort of water related package that's supposed to roll out over 4 years, or if it's a separate pot that is meant to go out immediately, because he announced it in 2 different places. So a lot's happening. I will note that when he made one of his announcements, he did have representatives from the Senate and the Assembly there with him. So it signals they're talking, and we are certainly talking. And our message has been, we have ratepayers that need help. It makes sense for it to come to the utility so that we can then address that debt, and that no region should be left behind. And a utility that's operating well still has people in need, and we have a high disadvantaged community population.
Yeah, I'd be very concerned about the third-party provider model. It's very inefficient. It requires extensive outreach. We know which of our customers haven't paid their bills.
Exactly. Yeah, and just to add to that, what we're pushing for is something that reduces the winners and losers, where it's sort of a free for all and first come, first serve. When we initially started talking about that, our thought was, okay, then you apply a percentage so that everybody's getting access to some relief instead of whoever, gets their application in first. But we're close to this, and we'll keep you updated. So far, it's exciting. There's a potential here that East Bay Mud ratepayers may see some relief. And if there are no more questions, a quick federal update, and then I can turn it back. On the federal side, first thing is that the House members have asked for the community funding project requests. Their deadlines have all passed. All, if not all, most of the House members have posted which projects they are putting forward. Representative Swalwell has elected to put forward East Bay Mud's Upper San Leandro Water Treatment Improvement Project for a $10 million funding request. So our request is in the hopper. That's great news. Are we going to be successful? We don't know yet, but we've certainly hit a threshold with this, and we're very pleased about that. On the budget side, Director Young, you'd asked about President Biden's budget announcement that happened, I believe it was in March. That was his skinny budget, sort of his conceptual budget, where he did talk about water infrastructure. We're waiting for the full budget, which should be later this month, where we expect to see detail. We do expect to see a continued focus on water infrastructure. The House and the Senate are now positioning for budget discussions or accomplishing this through reconciliation. And the Senate has passed its infrastructure package. The House has not. They've still got a couple of vehicles out there. But water infrastructure is a part of all of these conversations. So we're hopeful that we at least see a focus through this budget process on water infrastructure. On the policy side, there are a lot of bills. There's a lot of press release bills out right now, a lot of noise, and we are looking at everything that sort of hits that sweet spot of district interest area, priority area. And when things settle a little bit and we've got a clear sense of what the vehicles are and what the approaches are, we'll come back to you with bills for consideration. I don't expect that to be until the summer. And that's the report. Any questions?
All right, don't see me. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marlene. So next up is the GM report on the rates and charges. And just as a reminder, in the past 6 months, really leading up today, we've held workshops on our system capacity charges, as well as 2 budget workshops to review and get feedback on our proposed fiscal year 22 and 23 budget. We've incorporated the board feedback, and we really do feel that we have a budget that allows us to meet our needs while continuing to recognize the impact that COVID has had on our customers. We've really, in this report, we really are pushing for some changes that we should all be very proud of. So next is the filing of the report and recommendations on the fiscal year 22 and 23 rates and charges, capacity charges, and other fees, and also setting the public hearing for June 8th. And Sophia Skota, Director of Finance, will present the information in the report.
Good afternoon, Board of Directors, and also members of the audience today. I just want to say as I start my report that everyone can imagine the number of people that worked on this report. People from the new business office, water, wastewater, folks that work out in the field, folks that have been working from home for a long time. So this is a huge effort. It's a large document and the culmination of work over many months. And this is our report on our water and wastewater schedule of rates and charges and capacity fees, as well as some other fees that we'll talk about, and setting the date for our public hearing. And this is the date that we have put out in our Proposition 218 notice to the public of June 8th for hearing the proposed rates and charges. So with that, we'll move to the next slide. So what we're going to cover this afternoon is we'll go over the budget and rates calendar, what we've done to date and what remains at this point. We'll go over the proposed rates and charges that must comply with Proposition 218, now Articles 13C and D of the California Constitution. We'll also go over the other fees and charges and regulations that will also be changing, and then we'll cover some next steps. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide. So just again, a dip into our budget and rates calendar. We held our first budget workshop in January, a second one in March. And as a result of the decisions made at the end of that workshop, the Proposition 218 notice for the next 2 fiscal years, for fiscal years 22 and 23, were put into the mail, sent out to the public. And all of those were had to be in receipt of the individuals living in the properties to whom the notice was sent by April 23rd. We also conducted, for the first time, a budget and rates webinar, and that was advertised as part of our 218 notice, and that was held last week. And then here we are today on May 11th to present our general manager's report on rates and charges to the board of directors. At this point, we do have the public hearing planned for June the 8th. And given where we are, we're definitely going to be holding it virtually. If there are any changes, it may be both in person and virtual, but at this point it's virtual. And if the rates and charges that we will discuss today are approved on June the 8th, those FY22 rates and charges would go into effect on July the 1st. Next slide. So now we're going to dive a little bit into the rates and charges that are, again, subject to Proposition 218 or our California state constitution. So moving on to the next slide. The main point of this slide is just to note, particularly for members of the public, that our FY22 and 23 rates have been developed based on our proposed budget. And what we do is we take the revenue requirements for our fiscal years 22 and 23 that have been developed working since August of this last year. And then we put that into our rate model. And so where we have ended up is increases that are proposed of 4% and 4%. So 4% in each year for fiscal years 22 and 23 for the water utility and for the wastewater utility. I do want to note, and we'll mention it later, that 2 years ago, we made an effort over the last 6 years to try to present some projections for the public and for the board of directors of where we think rate increases will be. So one, I mean, there's an expectation setting piece around, continued increases in cost and our continued increases in infrastructure, and that those do require rate increases. And we had projected that we would be at 5% and 5% on the water utility side and 4% and 4% on the wastewater side. And so we are coming in, working very hard as a team, cognizant of where our public has been this last year at 4% and 4% on the water side, and right on the dot where we had thought we would be on the wastewater side. So again, these proposed rates do follow our cost of service studies, both on the water and wastewater side, and they are consistent with both board policy and with Proposition 218. We also want to note that Schedule L, which contains our drought surcharges, will remain in effect in the event of more severe water shortages. As we know, we are currently in stage 1. That involves voluntary rationing and a 0% drought surcharge. But should things become more severe, the board of directors could consider imposing drought surcharges contained in Schedule L. Next slide. So if we look over here again, what we see is a summary of our currently proposed fiscal year 22 and 23 rates and charges for the water and wastewater side, water in blue, wastewater in green. And then we have our sort of look out into the future for fiscal years 24, 25, and 26. So moving into the 4% now and staying there over the next couple of years based on what we see today. Next slide. So what we have here is the average monthly bill for water and wastewater. And so these are the impacts based on the 4% rate increases that we're talking about. So when we look there at the water user of 8 CCF, and that's our average water use, I do want to note that our mean or average is not the same as our median. So median water use is closer to 6 CCF with the average at 8. So it means that more than 50% of our customers are actually paying less than what this average bill is. So when we look at the end of FY22 at a proposed bill that would come in at about $66 based on this usage, we're talking about $2.20 per day. At the end of FY23, that goes up to $2.30 per day, so an increase of a dime over that year. On the wastewater side, we've got the 2391 bill, so that's 80 cents a day, going up to 83 cents a day at the end of FY23. Next slide. So this shows kind of a wider range of impact. So we've got users who are very low users. So you see a user there of 4 CCF. The CCF for members of the public, centum cubic feet. So centum being 100, so 100 cubic feet. And 1 cubic foot, 100 cubic feet, 1 CCF is 748 gallons. So what you see there then, the 25th percentile user at 4 CCF, the 50th percentile at 6, 75th percentile at 10, and going up to the 95th percentile at 24 CCF. And then it shows the average down there at the bottom. And so this again shows the range of bills. So for the 25th percentile, the 4 CCF user at the end of FY23, the bill's going up to $48.54. And again, lower users, the fee being more dominated by the fixed charge. And then at the 95th percentile, you can see there at the end of FY23, a bill of $186.02 per month. Next slide. This shows the same kind of a range of impacts on the wastewater side, and you'll see it's a much smaller range. So part of the reason is because, as you might imagine, we are not looking to charge for water that's used for outdoor watering. We only want to charge for water that we are actually treating at our wastewater plant. So there's a single family residential max of 9 CCF. And so that translates at the end of FY23 into a bill just under $30 per month, or $1 per day at the maximum end for the wastewater treatment portion. We also collect an annual wet weather facilities charge from all properties connected to the wastewater system, and we'll talk about that shortly. Next slide. Here we're covering the non-residential wastewater treatment charges. And so this is showing some of the types of businesses that we charge. So restaurants, hotels, hospitals. You can see there the proposed FY22 rates and charges and for FY23. And as you might imagine, restaurants with contributing more strength to the system are paying a higher rate than, for example, a retail office. So again, hotels contributing more than a retail office, for example. Next slide. So when we look at our wet weather facilities charges, I mentioned those earlier as not being contained as part of the bill. And part of that is because that is not shown on the bi-monthly bill that's sent out to our customers. This charge is collected on our property tax bill for residential and non-residential parcels connected to our wastewater system. Our wet weather facilities enable us to manage the large increases in flow that we see at our treatment plant as a result of heavy rains. So to be able to have the facilities in place and maintained, to be able to treat those flows when our biological system can't multiply by 5 or 10 as a result of those rains, we have this charge to maintain all of the facilities that we need to be able to do that work. For a small lot under 5,000 square feet at the end of FY23, that lot would be paying about $125 on an annual basis. So that would be on the property tax bill. A large lot greater than 10,000 square feet would be paying about $447 at the end of FY23. Next slide. So one thing that we like to do is to kind of see how we stack up when we compare ourselves to other public agencies that are also providing water service in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we see is that at present, we are kind of at the top end of the middle. We of course want to be in the middle of the middle, or of course, even better if we're below the middle. We're roughly where we'd like to be. We'd like to note that there are many agencies that suspended their rate increases during the last year, and that many of those agencies are going to have to deal with the impacts of those decisions over the long run in the future. Next slide. On the wastewater side, what you'll see there is there's a blue bar and a green bar, and all of the other agencies have green bars. And the reason is because East Bay MUD only provides wastewater treatment. So for people who are living in Oakland or Berkeley, there's a separate charge that you're seeing on your bill. And that charge is represented by the green. And so the green is kind of an average of all of the collection systems. It only controls the blue portion of that.
I think you're frozen, Sophia.
Advance to the next slide. There may be kind of a frozen situation. Can everyone continue to hear me?
Yes. We can hear you now, yes.
Is anyone able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
You hear me now? Okay, great. Can we advance to the next slide?
Which slide number do you want, Sophia? We're on 14. You're freezing again. Sophia, you're muted. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you now.
Excellent, thank you. Back on track, slide 14. So on this slide, we are reviewing our proposed water and wastewater capacity charges. The board of directors will remember, and members of the public who were present, that we presented late last year an update of our water system capacity charges. We took a look at our costs, the assets in our system that we're looking to recover. And we also looked at the actual water usage. So we looked at our latest data and projections for water use. And having updated our system capacity charge study with that new data, we essentially found that a decrease in the SEC for single-family residential customers and non-residential meters up to about 1.5 inches, and in some smaller subcategory, multifamily residential was warranted. We also created a new category for a small 500 square foot and under category. We haven't looked at multifamily residential rates in a long time. They're now a large part of the growth in within our service area, and so it made sense to do that. So overall, the SEC it has been reduced by about 30%, so a very significant reduction. On the wastewater capacity fee side, we've adjusted our charges for FY22 ENR construction costs, and there is a slight increase in the single-family residential charge, up about 1.4%. We've also adopted, or we're proposing that we adopt the same small R dwelling unit category and updated water use from our current updated study. Let's move on to our next slide. Moving on to slide 15, if possible. Thank you. So the district has 3 SEC regions that are shown here. Region 1, which tends to be cooler, smaller lots hugging the coast. The sort of central region, Region 2 at the top of the hills, and then the warmer area with larger lots represented by Region 3 to the far right or the east of our service area. Next slide. So what we'll see here is that we've got each of the regions represented, what the current SEC and current SFR estimated water use is, and what the updated SFR use is based on the work that we did. And then you'll see the subsequent change that is essentially represented by the SEC study. So a Region 1, a decrease of about 35%, a decrease of about 40% for Region 2, and a decrease of 13% in Region 3. Next slide. So what we see here is for the multifamily residential sector, what the SEC rates are by region. So in this case, one thing that you'll note is based on data, we were able to confirm that it no longer makes sense to sort of have this differentiation between regions 1, 2, and 3 with respect to water use. And so water use is now consistent for those units, 120 gallons per day for regions 1, 2, and 3. And then for the smaller multifamily dwelling as well, this is a new category consistent at 95 gallons per day. And again, based on data. So this represents roughly a 30% decrease in most of these areas, slightly there down at 38%. Next slide. All right, so what we see here is the SEC non-residential rates for a 5/8 inch meter. And so you'll see there on the far right again, minus 41%, minus 35.8%, and minus 24.4%. All right, next slide. So, I do want to say, obviously, that a result from the SEC study being a decrease in single-family residential and non-residential SECs is going to result in less revenue to the district, and that has been built into the proposed budget. So now we're going to jump into other proposed updates to our rates, fees, and charges. And so one, we've got a series of changes that basically ensure that we've got reasonable fees based on cost of recovery. So the kinds of fees that are included in special services, might be account assist, meter testing, hydrant backflow fees, things. We're also making sure that our installation charges are updated, Public Records Act charges, recreation fees, water service regulations, and applicable wastewater fees. Next slide, sorry. So now we're on slide 20. And what we see here are some of the fees and charges. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Is everyone able to hear?
Yes.
We can hear you, Sophia.
Yes.
Yes, you can hear me? Okay, great. I just want to confirm. I sometimes am seeing a note running across my district screen that says that the system is unstable. The kind people from ISD were in my office earlier, but I guess there's some issues that we're experiencing. So other fees and charges on the water side, charges for special services, real property use, and application fees are increasing depending, since it's actually a cost of service type of calculation, 1 to 3%. And then we've got our installation charges that are being updated to reflect district costs at about 2%. Next slide. With regards to our regulations that are governing water service, we have changes that we're making to reflect changes in law required to reflect junior ADUs and ADUs. We also are making some changes that are required to sections 3 and section 7 that allow us to make sure that we're correctly identifying how we're serving using hydrant meters. And then some changes to section 13 that essentially are is giving us a little more flexibility when it comes to customer leaks, more discretion in very limited certain circumstances. Next slide. So when we look here at some more regulation changes, section 15, this discontinuation of service is basically changes to reflect our new practices with respect to flow restrictors and liens for owner-occupied houses, which eliminates the need for shutoffs. And then we're again making changes that are required with respect to JADUs or junior accessory dwelling units, other changes to water efficiency requirements, and then ongoing work to replace pronouns in a gender neutral way. Next slide. We also are making similar changes on the wastewater side, so increases to some permit and monitoring fees, 3 to 6% a year, reflecting our actual costs. On the wastewater PSL, you've heard about some of the work that wastewater is doing with respect to homeowners associations, and so again, fees to reflect our costs. Next slide. On the wastewater resource recovery rates, there's an increase of up to 1 to 3 cents per gallon that enables us to charge customers to reflect district costs for specific waste streams as we learn more about those waste streams. And also some wastewater interceptor connection fees that again reflect our costs, about 2.6%. So moving on to our next slide. The recommended board action and steps are filing the general manager's report and recommendation with the board and asking that the board set the public hearing for June the 8th. I do want to note that we are now on slide 26, where we wanted to just take a moment based on some questions that I was received about sponsorships and memberships. Sponsorships and memberships essentially help the district work to advance our priorities, engaging with our stakeholders and customers and contractors on diversity, education, job opportunities, industry, innovation, all of those types of things. So our proposed budget for FY22 includes just under $1 million, actually in each of those years, 22 and 23, for these efforts. And you can see a small chart at the bottom where we break out industry collaboration, which is the largest piece of this, associations and trade organizations, which make up the second largest piece, some other educational and outreach. So this includes things like walks and so on and so forth, Solano Stroll or other types of activities like this, and then chambers and non-governmental organizations. It sounds like Director Mellon has a question.
I have received a breakout on each of those categories, and I think it would be useful for the board members to similarly see a breakout. And I've made my own comments on a couple of them. For example, there's 2 chambers that are in my ward that have not been functional for some time. And while it's not very much money, I just can't see giving money to an organization that isn't there. And I had another area, the International Foundation of Employee Benefit Plans. I was surprised to see that we're a member, Gesundheit, that we're a member of it when all it's really being used for is occasionally going to their annual conference. And you don't save money when you pay for a membership, but God bless you again. And
I'll take them, all of them, blessings.
So anyway, my suggestion is it'd probably be good if other board members could take a look at it. And on the NGOs in particular, I think there's a few of them that we have a settlement agreement on them that requires us to be long-term contributors. So anyway, if you could do that, I think that would be swell.
Yeah, and Sophia, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're going to put that level of detail in the as part of the budget books, which is something we haven't done in quite some time.
That's correct, Clifford. We found that when we looked back that there was a point in time before our current team in finance was in place that was part of the budget book, and for some reason it was removed, and so we're going to add it back in as an appendix. Thank you.
Thank you.
But it's not in what we got over the weekend. Okay.
Yes. And so with that, I conclude my report.
All right, any questions? Sophia, I wanted to start out with one question on the fees for the, where to go here? For the sewer, private sewer lateral compliance have taken a jump here. It says to reflect district costs. Have our costs gone up, or are we just assessed the costs such that they're more than we thought they were?
I believe, and with the homeowners association fees, I believe that was a new ordinance, or that was put in place by the board. So I believe it was new.
This has increased HOA oversight fee from $300 to $450, but it also has increased fee compliance certificate from $270.
Oh, you're right. Okay. Yes. Well, it's reflective of our actual costs. in that case, but it may have been that the HOA fee, the first year, we may, this is a new fee, and so we may not really have known what our costs were until we actually got into it, since it's only been a year and a half or so. Clifford, does that sound familiar to you?
Yeah, it's less interested in the HOA than the other one, because I hear hear a lot of pain from residents.
Yeah, and
not a lot, but that one will come up reasonably often.
I see. Okay.
And I'm just kind of curious if it's going up, whether that's something, again, that, we've taken a look at our costs, we weren't assessing them correctly, or whether there's some additional things that have actually required a higher fee.
And Sophia, maybe Eileen can provide a little more insight as well.
Yeah.
Eileen?
Yeah, hi, great, thank you. Yeah, we've got additional requirements with the consent decree regarding the private sewer laterals and the homeowners. And so we've looked at what it entails now as we're approaching additional deadlines. And so that's the reason the fees have gone up. And we've actually calculated what is the cost. And so that's the reflection of these updated fees.
I'm sorry, so there's additional things that 2 years ago we didn't have to do, but now we have to do?
With the homeowners associations, yes, there is. And they had the deadline, and the deadline's coming up. And so it's now much more staff intensive. We're having a lot more staff work on the private sewer laterals because of the upcoming deadlines for the homeowners associations and the consent decree.
Okay, but not for private individuals.
No, we continue to have our goals that we're trying to meet, and we have looked at the cost of doing it, and it has increased. In fact, it's gotten more complicated during COVID to do private sewer lateral inspections.
Okay, thank you. John, you have your hands up.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick question. Good presentation, Sophia. I know that when we posted on Facebook the webinar ability for people to watch, and I reposted it on my Facebook, how many people actually watched and participated? Do we know?
Yes, we do know. It wasn't a huge number, but I believe that there were 10 or 15 people. Some of them were district staff, who aware that we'd be presenting that night. Clifford, I don't know if you want to add anything, but that was my recollection.
Yeah, you got the numbers are about that in that range.
So I guess my question is, I saw when it was probably about 2 hours before the presentation, when it was on Facebook. Are we going to look at doing this again? So for transparency, so more people, if they so choose, if you taped it, you can just run the reel again, so to speak?
So we have recorded it, and someone from Public Affairs might need to check, but I believe that we've been posting some of our recordings on our finance, the East Bay Mud.com /
Yeah, it's all posted online, Sophia.
And also, Director Coleman, this is sort of the culmination of a whole series of events that we've been participating in starting late last year. And we've gotten really positive feedback from people who continue to be interested in learning more about the district. And people have really, I think, appreciated these forums. And we all feel like we want to do more of this, reflected in some of the comments from Katz and Associates this morning in Planning Committee as well.
Thank you.
Director Young?
Yeah, I mean, I just following on to that. I mean, I was a part of a couple of these, other presentations, and they had, decent turnout. I think best when, you're piggybacking on an existing audience versus trying for us to generate an organic audience. But that the other thought is to, post it on Nextdoor. That gets another, you can't really control what happens. You can't control what happens after that anyway, but, that's another venue beyond, beyond Facebook. But I, appreciate, I think, it's one of the things that COVID has allowed is us to be, more proactive about putting ourselves out on many different channels, and really want to just appreciate the efforts of staff to make the rounds with this presentation to community organizations all around the service area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Sophia. I think our next action, do we accept this and set the date of the hearing? Is that the deal? Yeah, we file this report and recommendation for revisions and set a public hearing for Tuesday, June 8th.
That's correct.
I'd like a motion for that in second.
So moved.
Second.
Director McIntosh makes the motion. Director Young makes the second, and then we'll take a roll call vote.
Director Coleman,
Yes.
Director Katz,
Yes.
Director Mellon,
Yes.
Director McIntosh,
Yes.
Director Patterson,
Yes.
Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
So next we have Lisa Serrani, Manager of Employee Services, who will introduce and make the first reading of an ordinance amending sections 21 and 41 of East Bay MUD Retirement System Ordinance number 40.
Thank you, General Manager. Team, I will just let you run slides and I'll just have you advance. So thank you very much. Yes, this is Lisa Serrani. I'm the Manager of Employee Services, and the Retirement System Ordinance 40. We are looking to make a couple of updates today, and I'm going to take you through those. So next slide. So section 21 of our retirement ordinance provides for an optional modification of a member's retirement allowance to provide an actuarially equivalent allowance for a surviving beneficiary. A couple of things that we adjust with our actuaries actually impact this optional benefit. One is the actual rate of return, the actuarially assumed rate of return, as well as mortality tables and mortality assumptions that our actuaries bring us. Those two items impact the optional beneficiary allowance in section 21. The actuarially assumed rate of return also adjusts cash outs of retirement contributions and postings of interest to employee accounts. Today, we are only making updates to the mortality tables after conversations with our actuaries. There's not a change to the actuarially assumed rate of return. That will remain at 7%. Next slide. So the updated mortality assumptions anticipate longer life expectancies for healthy and disabled retirees and shorter life expectancies for beneficiaries. It's based on updated data from the Retirement Plans Experience Committee of the Society of Actuaries that for the first time has published mortality tables based exclusively on public sector pension plan experience in the United States. This change was recommended to the district's retirement board as part of the 2016 to 2020 actuarial experience study. The retirement board adopted these proposed mortality tables at their meeting on November 19th, 2020. And those mortality assumptions were used in the 2020 actuarial valuation. This change of mortality tables in our retirement ordinance will become effective July 1st, 2021. Next slide. So the IRS actually requires that any actuarial assumptions that are used to determine the optional form of benefits be specifically specified in our retirement ordinance. And so this change that we are suggesting to section 21 will update the retirement language as it relates to mortality tables to ensure that it is consistent with the changes adopted by the retirement board in November. Next slide. So the second change to the retirement ordinance is in section 41. Section 41 describes the IRS rules for minimum distributions from a retirement plan. In 2019, there was an act called the Setting Every Community Up for Retirement Enhancement Act of 2019, also known as the Secure Act. This act changed the age at which minimum distributions must begin from age 70 and a half to age 72. Now this change, this Secure Act changed just this one piece of our retirement ordinance. It also had several changes to our deferred compensation plans. Most of our members retire from our system, but this would impact a non-retired member who is no longer working at the district or a reciprocal agency. If they used to have to be 70 and a half. Now, if they're age 72, they would either need to retire from our system or begin taking these minimum distributions from the plan. So the update here is really just a change in the age from 70 and a half to 72. Also, just to note that this did go into place in 2020, and the IRS gives us until 2022 to make the update to our plan documents. So we're bringing this for the retirement ordinance now, and we will come back with changes for our deferred comp plans around the Secure Act. So as it says here, section 21 will be updated, section 41 will be updated to reflect the change in age from 70 and a half to age 72. Next slide. So the steps to be able to finalize adoption of these ordinance amendments are that we do a first reading, which we're doing today on May 11th, 2021. We will bring this back for a second reading and for the board to be able to take a vote on May 25th, 2021. After that, we take the ordinance amendment and we place it in the newspaper for 2 successive weeks. And then after that, the ordinance updates would become effective on July 1st of 2021. And then after that, staff does publish and distribute copies of the revised ordinance by the middle of July 2021. And that is all I have today, unless there are any questions.
Any questions from board members? So this is just a reading today. There's no decision, no vote. It will be on the agenda for our next board meeting, in which case there will be a vote.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. So next is a discussion on our once a decade redistricting update and the appointment of a redistricting ad hoc committee, and Craig Spencer will lead the discussion.
If I could real quick, the things that we did with the retirement ordinance have been discussed at the retirement board.
Thank you for that, Frank.
Yes, so this is on the item 13 on the redistricting efforts by the district. There is a memo in your packet that talks about the delays in the completion of the 2020 census, and that has led to a delay of getting us the data that we need in order to adjust the ward boundaries. We don't expect that data to be available to us until October or November of 2021. We will have to turn this around and come up with proposed boundary changes and conduct public hearings and public outreach for a period of time, but by May of 2022, we need to have all of the ward boundaries completed in anticipation or in advance of the November 2022 elections. As in the past, we began the redistricting process ahead of the release of the data, and it starts with the appointment of an ad hoc committee comprised of 3 board members who will then start meeting in June of this year to consider establishing redistricting guidelines and public outreach activities. The proposed schedule is in the memo that was submitted to the board. As the ad hoc committee meets, all of the agendas that would be considered by the ad hoc committee will also be made available to the board at the same time. So right now, the only action to take is for the board to appoint a 3-member ad hoc committee, and then their work will start in June. Thanks.
Is there any established convention for the ad hoc committee?
I don't think there is. John, I seem to recall when I first came on the board, I think you were probably the board president. I remember you appointing, I don't remember.
Correct.
I think you've been on the last two, but.
Yeah, it was the board president when we did it last time, and then we tried to take into account east, west, north, south, so no one part of the district was overwhelming another part of the district in terms of representation.
Yes, the last time.
On the ad hoc committee?
Yes.
The last time it was President Coleman, Director Linney, and Director McIntosh.
They did a great job.
Yeah. Do I have any volunteers for this?
I think Director McIntosh has a comment. She got muted by accident. One moment.
Hi, I'm looking at the criteria for last time, and it says schedule 2 public meetings in Oakland and 1 public meeting east of the hills. We had one in west of the hills as well, right?
Oakland's west of the hills.
Oakland is west of the hills.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking in terms of West Contra Costa County specifically.
I don't recall, Lisa, if we had that last time or not. And quite frankly, in the world we're working in now, until post-COVID, it's all going to be done remotely anyways.
Well,
sure, but still a question, John.
Oh yeah, it's legit. I mean, if you want to look at diversity, you could have West Contra Costa, Central Contra Costa, and then Alameda going Oakland south, I guess, to some degree, would cover large swaths of the district. I don't know.
Well, I propose that we have 3 new different board members
No.
to handle the process.
I'm interested in doing it. I guess I'll volunteer.
And so am I, actually.
I'll volunteer.
Is that Lisa?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Do we have to make a motion to approve?
Yeah, there's not a set reason why I need to be part of it, and I'm happy to not be part of it.
But it would be better if the board president were represented. I'll step back for you, Doug.
Hey, I was going to nominate the 3 from last time.
No.
No, I heard 3 different ones volunteer this time, or not 3 different. It was John, Lisa.
No, John.
And that would be fine with me.
I was on last time.
And I'm fine with Marguerite going for it. You can do this well, Marguerite. It's right up your alley.
All right. So Marguerite, John, and myself, is that what I'm seeing? A vigorous nod from Lisa on? Lisa's appointing the team this time.
Well, I think she's setting herself up for the next ad hoc committee appointment, though, probably.
I would make a motion if you need that for that.
You better get it in there fast, otherwise it's.
So moved, Frank?
So moved.
Second.
We don't want to have any railroads running through here.
Yeah. All right, so we have a motion that I think I'm supposed to appoint, so I'll officially appoint, but confirm that the makeup of the reapportionment ad hoc committee will be myself, Marguerite Young, and John Coleman. And we'll take a roll call vote on that.
Director Coleman?
Yes.
Director Katz?
Yes.
Director Millen?
Yes.
Director McIntosh?
Yes.
Director Patterson? Yes. Director Young,
Yes.
President Lenny.
Yes. All right, anything else we need to do on that?
No, you're good there.
No? And then,
You're zooming right along again.
June 22nd. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So
on to our general manager's report then.
thank you. So I have 4 items, and I know it's been a long day, so we'll try to move through these fairly quickly. First is the COVID update. COVID numbers certainly in California are improving, and the number of Californians and employees that are fully vaccinated is around 40% now. So Dave Briggs, Director of Operations and Maintenance, will give you the update. And we'll also answer one of the questions from the board is how much have we spent to date on our COVID response? And finally, Dave will cover the safe return to work plan for employees and the board.
Okay, good afternoon. Do I have control over here? Looks like I do. Thank you. Good afternoon, President Lenny. Good afternoon, members of the board. So the state, I'm on slide 2, the state recently updated its statistics statewide and at the county level. Alameda, Amador, Contra Costa, Calaveras counties remain in the orange tier. Sacramento and San Joaquin remain in the red tier. All counties are progressing, albeit slowly, and Alameda County is in the lead here and may be approaching yellow in 2 or 3 weeks. However, as you know, the state is intending to sunset the tier system by the middle of next month under the governor's plan to reopen and essentially step back from regulating businesses at the state level. And whether or not that corresponds to rescinding emergency declarations or executive orders remains to be seen, but at that time. But we do know that increasingly over the last few months, really all the rules that we live by here that are COVID related are coming out of Cal OSHA and the California State Department of Public Health. Local counties look to the state. CDC guidance is also used, but really that is the center of gravity for the rulemaking for COVID. And along those lines, Cal OSHA has an important board meeting next week on May 20th, where they will begin to entertain new rules that are reflecting the progress of vaccinations in the state. We've read those, and they may or may not be adopted in the form that we've seen. But we're not anticipating a big change here at the district. Many of those rules are written for affording certain, giving individuals who have been vaccinated additional freedoms, but they're not based at the community level. And so there's really a limited impact that we can integrate here into our district operations. But there will be some change. All in all, our operations remain largely unaffected now 14 months into the pandemic. So slide 3, at the individual level, we have 85 positives, 14 contractors as well for contractors that work for the district. That number has not changed in almost 2 weeks. Both those numbers haven't changed in almost 2 weeks. We do not have any employees at home isolating because they are COVID positive, so all have returned to work. And I think that the 14 employees off work right now for COVID-related reasons, this number jumps around from day to day. It's actually a little lower right now. Those employees that are in that group, about 10 or 11 of them, are either quarantining, maybe symptomatic, or otherwise recovering from after effects of getting vaccinated. So that number
Dave,
is there a question?
Yeah, Dave, what's the quarantine period that's being used? Because when I came back from Florida, even though I didn't feel anything one way or the other, I self-quarantined for 7 days.
It may, so depending on your vaccination status, it may be as little as 7 days.
Okay, fully vaccinated. Thank you.
Yes, fully vaccinated. So also just looking at the graphic below, we see a 0 for May. It's 4 o'clock on May 11th. That is still a 0. Very happy to see that 0, and hopefully that 0 will stay for the rest of the month and beyond, but we'll see where we go. Slide 4, our vaccination update, the 38%, that's actually 42% right now as of a couple of hours ago. And in the county, Alameda County is about 52% fully vaccinated. So our employees, keep in mind, this is after they've filled out a form and notified our HR group. So some employees have not done that yet. So our numbers lagging a little bit just based on the bureaucracy. But I suspect that our numbers are very close to the countywide numbers at close to 50% fully vaccinated at the district. But our numbers, strictly speaking, are seeing 42% right now.
Dave, for board members, I mean, I know I'm fully vaccinated now, and others may be too, but we're not in this. I've not reported to anybody at East Bay MUD until now that I'm fully vaccinated.
Right now, Director Coleman, the procedure is for employees to report their status. Okay. You're more than welcome to fill out your form PE 157 and submit it to HR though at any time.
Never heard of it.
That'll boost our numbers. So we'd love to see that.
If I can be sent the form, I'll complete it and do it.
I'll do it for you. How about that?
Okay.
Okay. 33 million as of today, million doses have been administered in the state of California. You're probably also aware that the state is proudly boasting its 1% positivity rate, which is the lowest in the nation. I think it's a little higher now, 45 or so, 44% of Californians have been fully vaccinated, and 63%, if I update those figures, have been either have one or both doses of the vaccine. Yes, Director.
Is that what does that correspond to in terms of an R number? Like there's a.
Yeah. So yeah, the R number, the rate at which the disease is either contracting or expanding in the state of California, it does jump around from week to week. Last time I saw the statewide figure, it's below 1, so that's the important distinction. Probably in the 0.8, 0.9 level last time I checked, but it's contracting. Just since we're talking about numbers here, it is truly remarkable what's happening in Los Angeles. They have very, very low numbers and really amazing how much progress that huge urban center is making. It's really encouraging to see.
Kudos to Barbara Ferrer.
So
she's their director of health.
To round out this slide, we will continue to work with employees, promote and support vaccination, give employees information that tells them about the benefits and risks of vaccination. We'll tell them everything. And we have a lot of allies in this campaign, many large organizations, nonprofits, governments, et cetera. We're all trying to address vaccine hesitancy and improve our numbers. So we're definitely leveraging everybody else's work as we try to bring information to our employees, and we have 2 more information sessions planned just before the Memorial Day weekend. With respect to cost, which Clifford alluded to, and this came from the last board meeting, we're showing costs here that are both FY20 and 21 together, and we're showing 2 types of costs. The first are related to leave. So these are dollars or costs associated with employees not working on paid leave by federal available leave, state available leave, or district available leave related to COVID. This does not include sick leave. And that's totaling about $2.6 million over the past 14 months or so. The second category are costs associated with people working, but for some COVID-related activity. Now, a large chunk of that $20.7 million, about $11 million of that is related to the employee field rotations that we implemented last spring, in the spring of 2020. During that 6-week period where we were under the most restrictive of the shelter orders in all of our counties, and we're essentially operating at the district with a skeleton crew to just keep the place running. So we had hundreds of employees who normally do maintenance and construction and operation who were at home. They were getting paid. They were at work, so to speak, and we were keeping them as productive as we could, but they weren't at work doing their normal job. These costs that are shown here are mostly labor, although there certainly are supplies and materials in here associated with PPE and other materials that we use to facilitate telecommuting and IT related costs. But largely this is labor. So in one sense, this is this is dollars we would have paid anyway. So really the way to look at these costs, I think, is lost productivity versus an increase in our cash out the door. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so rounding out with the Safe Return to Workplace plan, we have two. We have one for employees and we have one for the board. The safety protocols are the same. The only reason why the plans are different is, as the board knows, the board operates under a different set of rules and regulations than employees, and so it's structured differently. But as we move forward, we will integrate all of the information we have. Whenever we have a basis from a local health order or state health order, whenever we have a basis to modify our safety protocols, we will act accordingly. But until that time, we will remain conservative and stay as protective as possible. The real, or one of the significant aspects of this Safe Return plan relates to the gradual and incremental increase in occupancy of our buildings. Most of our field locations, as the board knows, those employees have been reporting to work throughout. So this is mostly applicable to our buildings. We will incrementally increase occupancy. Right now in the administration building, we're about 15 or 20% occupied, but we will gradually increase that to 25% over the next month or so as we allow employees to voluntarily come back. Beginning on June 21st, which is the first Monday after the full-time telecommuting under the emergency plan expires essentially, we will begin to host employees back in this building and other buildings up to 1 to 2 days per week. Not everybody's going to be here on Monday. There are a lot of factors that go into this. We have a carpet project going on in the AB right now, which will probably stretch out a lot of time it takes to get people back in the building. But beginning on June 21st, that will be the first time we incrementally begin to get people back 1 or 2 days a week. The plan is 14 pages last time I looked at it, and it has an extensive amount of detail about all of the facets that matter about cleaning and how many people you can have in an elevator and whether or not you need to wear your mask in your cube while you're eating your lunch, and all sorts of details are in this plan. We will add more. There's extensive outreach planned before this is implemented, but we are working really hard on this to try to have something in place when the time comes. Switching to the board's plan, again, it's founded on yes.
Director Mellon, you have a question?
How's the input coming on the plans from folks at all levels of the organization?
Well, Director Mellon, as I mentioned earlier, we've had conversations with the unions. Our HR people are sharing this, and through structured meetings, we are getting feedback. Lots of questions. I think by and large, it's going well. We are integrating every comment we get. I think there's some specifics that I hear over and over again about concerns about parking, and just basic logistics that are very real and very good comments, and we're working through them. Most of the conversation and comments are coming from those employees that are members of Local 2019 and Local 21, not surprisingly, but we're working through them, and the dialogue remains open.
Thank you.
So briefly on the board's plan, again, founded on keeping everybody safe, the board, the public, people who visit the building, employees, etc. The board's plan is divided into 3 distinct periods that all are essentially founded on the status of Executive Order N-2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act. So period 1, where we are now, today, with the executive order in place, will go until period 2 begins when that executive order is rescinded. When that occurs, we don't know, possibly over the summer. But when this executive order is rescinded, that will be coincident with the state and local social distancing measures also being rescinded. The two go together. It's difficult to predict when this will happen. Period 3 is defined when all regulatory issues related to the pandemic are no longer in effect. So a slight difference from period 2, but technically a difference from period 2. And then just to look at this a little bit more carefully, period 1, where we are now, board meetings are virtual. That does not prevent board members from coming back and being in the boardroom. We can accommodate 2 or 3 of you on the dais and still maintain our social distancing, but that's an individual and voluntary decision by the board. All of our safety protocols remain in place that we've been operating to, so there's no change there. When the time comes for the Brown Act to be restored to the way it was before the pandemic, and the board is back in the boardroom, that would require, for a quorum, that would require your presence here, although you could participate remotely, just as you could prior to the pandemic, if you disclose your location and provide public access. So the same rules would apply prior to the pandemic in terms of forming a quorum. Period 1, the public only provides comment remotely and electronically. There is no physical location disclosed to the public. They cannot come to the boardroom. In period 2, the public would come back to the boardroom, but we could have occupancy limitations in the boardroom that corresponded to whatever safety protocols were in play at that time. So even though state and local social distancing measures may not be around, as the board is aware, there's a patchwork of other rules that could be out there that could still be in place to keep, because the coronavirus will still be present probably on the planet at that time. So there could still be regulations in place that we'd have to adhere to. But so that could limit occupancy in the boardroom and help us to keep everybody separated and safe. Period 3, again, after all pandemic-related regulations and guidelines are no longer in effect, and essentially what we might be left with is just best management practices. Again, not a huge, I think, material difference between periods 2 and 3. Last, just wanted to respond to the board's request to make sure the public knew how they could provide comment and interact with the board. These instructions are very clearly spelled out by the board secretary on the website. As the board is aware, public participation is limited now by telephone, video, or email. As I said, no physical location for board meetings is disclosed or designated. But prior to the board returning to the boardroom, prior to that, we would enhance, or the board secretary would enhance these instructions on the website so the public was very clear that they, at some point in the future, they will be welcome back into the boardroom, but they would still retain the ability to participate and provide comment over the phone or by video, etc. And there are certainly some members of the public who would prefer that, and that will benefit them as a matter of convenience. I think our first board meetings that we have back, when you come back and we welcome you back, we would still have occupancy limitations in the building as well as in the boardroom until everything had been rescinded. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you.
Dave, you can fill out one of those forms for me too. I've been vaccinated.
What we'll do is we'll have the board secretary contact each of you, and we'll take care of it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to text it over to you.
Get those numbers up.
Okay. So I recognize, again, it's been a very long day, and for the Reg DEI update, if the board would like to hear the update, or just note that we do have another update in June, and then we have a special board meeting on June 29th. So if you'd like to hear the report, we can move forward, or if you want to hear the complete report next month, we can do that as well.
Don't we have a meeting scheduled with the consultant?
On June 29th.
Yeah. I think I could wait till June after we have the meeting with the consultant.
Okay, and we'll have an
I
update
agree.
in the beginning of June as well. Okay. If that's good with the board, we'll move on to the next item. So one of the questions from the last board meeting was, what are we doing on water conservation activities and our communications, especially our outreach to HOAs and multifamily residential customers. So we have Alice Tui, who will give the update on our conservation activities, and Kelly Zito will talk about our communications outreach.
Can you, good morning, good afternoon, this is Alice Tui. Can you hear me? Great. Thank you very much, Clifford, for that introduction. So as Clifford said, I'm going to be giving an update today on our water conservation activities. I'm going to be tag teaming a little bit with Kelly Zito. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in water conservation in response to the drought. And then she's going to talk a little bit about the outreach and messaging to help our customers. Could you advance to the next slide, please? So just a quick reminder of our goals. And just so you know, in recognition, as Clifford said, it has been kind of a long day. I'm going to move through these slides quickly, but please feel free to stop me, ask questions, or if there's anything you'd like to hear about more in the future, let us know. So the goals as we've come up with this plan for this current drought, of course, we want to achieve the board adopted conservation goals, which currently is a 10% voluntary reduction district-wide. Obviously, we want to raise awareness among our customers and make sure that they know what our plans are, and also make sure that we're supporting them in their efforts to conserve water. So we know that a lot of our customers are already conserving, but we know that there's also room to do more, and we want to make sure that our customers know about the tools and activities that we have. Could you go to slide 3, please? Thanks. So next, I'm going to be giving just an overview of some of the tools and programs that we are going to be leveraging in water conservation to help us achieve that 10% reduction before turning it over to Kelly to talk about the public outreach and messaging. And one of the key points that I really want to stress here, and you'll hear me talk about this quite a bit, is that we really want to make sure that we're supporting all of our customers in their conservation efforts. So that includes our bill-paying customers, so folks who have an account with East Bay MUD, have a meter, whether that's a residential customer, commercial, industrial, irrigation, but also what we call our non-bill paying customers. So that includes folks who are in multifamily residential complexes, HOAs, apartment buildings, etc. Next slide, please. So a couple pieces of good news towards the end of the day. First of all, one piece of good news, as I'm sure the board is aware, our customers are fantastic. They've always historically done a really good job of rising to the occasion and conserving when called to do so. During the last drought, when we asked for 20% conservation district-wide, they exceeded that. I think over the course of the drought, it was they reached 23 or maybe even more percent reduction. The other piece of good news is that we have some tools now that we didn't have during the last drought. So we've continued to modernize and advance our water conservation program, which I think puts us in a really good position and gives us some tools and relationships with our customers that we can leverage. So that includes things like our interactive web portal where customers can log on, they can get information about their consumption, they can do things like set up leak alerts, high use alerts, they can find out information about our programs. We have, I think, a lot more experience using digital tools like social media, for example, Twitter and Nextdoor, as well as tools like webinars. Just as an example, here's a flyer from our fall webinar series we did last year. We had 5 webinars in that series, and all of them were attended by, I believe it was between 150 and 180-ish people. And we did a spring series as well that was also well attended and included 2 webinars conducted in Spanish. We also have new technologies like things like flow meters that help our customers to understand their water use. And then we've greatly expanded our water report program. You might notice I no longer called it a home water report program. That's because we are now sending these to all our customers, including commercial and industrial customers. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start to talk now and drill down a little bit into some of the specific programs that we're planning to leverage during this drought. And the first big one that I want to talk about is promoting leak detection. I'm sure the board remembers we've talked a lot about our leak alert program, where our software is able to sort of look at customers' water use and make some assessments and identify patterns or high use that's likely caused by leaks. And then we can actually send alerts to those customers. This has been a very successful program, very high levels of engagement. Typically about half of the customers who receive those alerts open them, and about 20% digitally resolve them, which means that they actually click the link, go to our website, walk through the tool. Oftentimes they'll report back to us on what they found. And customer satisfaction with this service is typically around 96%. So it's very popular. Customers always appreciate hearing about it. One thing that we have started doing in water conservation over the past year is doing targeted phone outreach as well. We only have email addresses for about 50 or so % of our customers. So we are doing phone outreach to those customers who we've identified have leaks, but we don't have an email address for them, or maybe they haven't interacted with the leak alert. And again, customers typically, the response to this has been positive. So that's something we're going to continue to leverage, and we can look at using social media and other tools to help our customers understand how to check for leaks. Next slide, please. So efficient irrigation. Probably the bulk of our water savings during this drought is going to come from improving outdoor water use. So some of the kind of key points here are we want to be really consistent in our messaging and try to keep it simple for our customers. Things like just establishing a weekly watering schedule, avoiding runoff and overspray, making sure they're watering at the right times of day to avoid evaporation. We also have a lot of tools already to help customers manage their irrigation, so we want to make sure we're leveraging those. Our IRIS water budget program provides customized weather-based budgets for our large irrigation customers. Right now we have around 4,400 accounts that are signed up for those budgets, so that gives us information to do targeted outreach to those folks. As I mentioned, our water reports, our home water reports are a great resource. And then we have other tools on our website like calculators, webinars, etc., that can help customers learn how to manage their water use. Next slide, please. So I know that there is some board interest in this particular issue, which is how do we reach out to those customers who maybe don't have an account with us, folks who live in apartment buildings, condominiums, who are using our water. So we do have some strategies that we're going to be kind of promoting in water conservation to reach those customers. And then I think when Kelly talks about, the sort of broad outreach that her group is going to be leading, that will, be reaching those customers as well. We do, in water conservation, do outreach to HOAs. And again, this typically goes back to that issue of efficient irrigation, so we'll be emphasizing that messaging. The water reports that go to our multifamily residential customers, we're going to be working with our software vendor to try to enhance those particular reports to make them a little bit more targeted and focused for the multifamily residential sector. We look for opportunities to partner with building managers to help them educate their tenants, and then we're also going to be looking for ways to use our existing tools like our website to try to get back some information from these customers about things like how many dwellings and tenants they have in each building, because that gives us a better understanding of their water use. Next slide. So I don't want to forget our commercial, industrial, and institutional, our CII customers. A couple of the items that I've already mentioned do apply to this sector, like, in terms of consistent messaging for efficient irrigation, using the water budgets and the water reports to reach out to those customers. For the CII sector specifically, we do have our quarterly CII newsletter that we email out to those customers, and that's a great way for us to provide them with messaging. Another thing I want to mention here, and this should say most large CII accounts have AMI. So thanks to a grant we got from the Bureau of Reclamation, we've installed, I believe that grant was for 3,000 AMI meters on large accounts. So that makes it easier for us to help those customers do things like track leaks, which allows us to do proactive outreach to those customers. And then we do work with some of our largest industrial and commercial users to make sure that they're logged on to our web portal and understand the services that are available, and so that they're able to monitor their water use. Next slide. So we do, of course, want to leverage our rebate programs. A drought is a great time for somebody to get rid of their lawn and put in some water-efficient landscaping. So we're going to be looking for opportunities to further promote those existing programs that we have. Just some quick facts, FY21 to date, we've already replaced or rebated 121,000 square feet of lawn. We also have our flow meter rebate program that was started in the end of 2018. So far, year to date, we've done 288 flow meter rebates. So those are actually very, very popular right now. The word has gotten out about them. Next slide, please. And then last but by no means least, just for the board's knowledge, we do know that during past droughts, there's been usually a significant increase in water waste reports. So we've been working kind of behind the scenes to prepare for that, to sort of simplify our process for customers to report issues. We updated the webpage, as you can kind of see here. We've added this sort of drop-down list so that customers can give us some more information about exactly what they're seeing, so we can make sure it's going to the right group, whether it's water conservation or dispatch in the case of something that looks like it could be a main break, et cetera. And then we are also kind of enhancing that website to give customers the ability to send us photos. And then we do outreach to the folks who are reporting and to the customers to educate those customers on efficient water use. So those are just some of the things that we're kind of thinking in terms of water conservation, in terms of leveraging some of our existing programs to try to get to that 10% savings. So I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, unless there are questions, so that she can talk about outreach and messaging.
All right, thanks, Alice. So good afternoon again, members of the board. Kelly Zito here. So I will just be elaborating a little bit on our efforts to get the word out about obviously the dry weather conditions, the drought declaration, what it means for our customers, and what it means for us in terms of water supply planning, and ultimately some other water sources down the line. So one of the best ways, next slide please. One of the best ways to get the word out broadly is through traditional and social media. And so you'll see here, the number of interviews that we just did in the last couple of weeks with a number of TV, radio, print, and online outlets. And I think this number is actually a little out of date. I think Andrea had 5 or more media requests just on Monday. And so I think that number is closer to 40 or 45 interviews on drought since the declaration that we made. Media are great consumers of Twitter and Facebook content. So you can see here that we've got a number of impressions, on those 2 channels as well, helping to also spread the word pretty broadly. Next slide. So as Alice mentioned, there's been a big uptick in interest in water conservation. It's one of the positives of this digital world, this virtual kind of meeting world that we moved into with the pandemic, that we're getting a lot more reach in terms of those water conservation webinars. And so obviously there's been a series of those, and and other presentations that have happened. And so I think there's almost 24 presentations total that have happened for the community to learn a little bit more about water conservation and various of our programs. Some of these next pieces are things that we are working on at the moment. So you'll see here, the customer pipeline, for instance, is one tool that we use. And, the most recent issue that just came out was about budget and rates, the proposal for FY22 and 23. We're already talking about story ideas for the next customer pipeline, and they will very likely be about, water conservation and water supply planning. And then, of course, we'll continue to leverage the existing tools that we use, direct email communication to customers, next door posts, which are great because they get to people who we might not have a billing relationship with necessarily. And then we're also working with water conservation to explore the idea of creating some more videos, something that's punchy and kind of appealing and compelling, and maybe even a little irreverent. And then also exploring maybe some options around advertising. We do get some credits through our the billboards that are on our properties, and so that's one avenue that we're looking at pursuing as well this summer. Next slide, please. So obviously online is a huge component of what we do. I think total we get somewhere around 80 or 100,000 web hits every month, and we think that obviously people are going to be looking a lot more for resources online. So we've tried to consolidate those and center those in one place. And so you'll see here some examples of our Water Smart area on our website that gives you a lot of resources around the plant book, the perennial favorite plant book, ways you can save at home, your water report. I didn't say home water report, your water report. And then, we also, just as of, I think, late yesterday or early today, our Drought web page has been updated and is live. And so that has, the most recent news about the drought declaration, other resources, what this means for people, and also links off to some of these resources here. Next slide, please. And so just one other, item that we wanted to make sure people were aware of is, adding some content about flushing water lines. People might see us out in the community working on a project and see this kind of situation, and we just want people to know, why we do this, what it means, and why, how we do try to, do things like protect the environment and manage those supplies wisely as much as we can. And so we did some of this messaging for the last drought, but we've obviously sort of resurrected it, and we've kind of fine-tuned it. So we think we've got a nice package of information at this point online, and we will continue to leverage those different channels and platforms as we move through the summer and beyond. So I think with that, if you have any questions for me or Alice.
Yeah, Kelly, this is John. I have a quick question. Good report for both of you. Schools are going to be starting to go back more in session, probably really in fall. And are we going to be reaching out to the schools again like we have in the past? Because that's such a great educational venue for students to teach their parents, and being in the middle of the drought, I wouldn't want us to waste that opportunity, as schools get back in mode again in September, October timeframe.
Absolutely, and I hear that professionally and personally, as I have an 11-year-old who comes home and teaches me about things at school all the time. Single-use plastics are a huge no-no in my house, for instance. So we are working right now on an effort to update all of our educational materials. You might recall that we had these materials, these booklets and things from that dated back to like the 70s and 80s and showed
Right.
things like water treatment operators smoking and things like that. And so we're actually
Isn't that what they do? Not.
So we are currently working on an effort to update all of those materials.
Great.
And so one of those pieces will be centered around water conservation and protecting natural resources and supplies. And so I don't know exactly when those will be ready, but we're looking to make those not just paper resources, but things that are available online that teachers can download that have more interactive activities and things like that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So last item, the monthly report is attached, and I can answer any questions. Okay, that's the end of my report. President Lenny.
Yep, thank you. We will get now to reports and director comments. Minutes from the April 27th Sustainability Energy Committee and the Finance Administration Committee were included in your agenda packet. We will now receive reports from today's Planning and Legislative Human Resources Committees. Director Young.
Yeah, Planning Committee met this morning and heard quite a number of items. We had a report on the Strategic Communications Master Plan, which is in development, which we'll be hearing more about at I think next month's board meeting. We reviewed the paving item that was on the agenda today in consent, discussed that. We had a report on fish returns, and they talked about the cyclical nature of the returns, and we had a low year this year, but the team is sort of on it. And then we did not hear, let's see, I'm missing one.
The hydrogen fueling station.
Hydrogen, all right. We have an opportunity to put a hydrogen fueling station at our wastewater treatment plant, which may in the future afford an opportunity to actually create some hydrogen fuel out of our biogas, and it's exciting. And then we deferred the recreation report, I think, yet again. So that was it for planning committee. That was really early this morning, so it feels like it was a long, long time ago.
All right, thanks. John, go ahead.
I'll make it real quick. At our Ledge HR meeting, we dealt with two issues: the legislative report and affirmative action. Approved both of them, and approved both this afternoon. That's it.
All right, thank you. Items for future consideration, please submit to the general manager or talk to me about it. Director comments, are there any director comments?
I hate to do it this late in the day, but I want to maybe help people end on a high note. If the slides are ready, I have 5 slides. They'll go really fast, I promise.
These are all of your grandchild, right?
No. No, she's coming home this weekend. I'm very excited. Do we have, okay. So I was able, so I'll tell you when there's sort of next slide. I had the, no, not yet. Go back. Okay. I had the opportunity to visit the Skyline Gardens restoration project up off of Grizzly Peak in my ward, and I got to tell you, it was pretty amazing, and I encourage every board member to get out there and see what they're doing. This is what a typical area of the gardens look like prior to work getting underway. Those are thistles and Scotch broom and just all kind of foxtail, all kinds of you know, non-native plants. Go next. Next slide. This is what it looks like, probably what it looked like about a few weeks ago. Wow. Yeah, next slide.
Beautiful out there.
Next slide, please. This is overlooking Siesta Valley. Gateway's out the other way.
There were only 2 slides.
Oh no, there's 5. Oh, there's a whole bunch more in
Yeah,
that email I sent.
Yeah, the email that we got had 2 photos attached.
No, there was 2 different. I should have looked at them before I.
Well.
Anyway, this it's a teaser. There's some really wonderful slides that Cynthia Atkinson, a former East Bay MUD staffer, sent along. These were the 2 from Glenn that he added, I think. We'll make sure they get sent out in a board packet. Sorry about that. So shorter than I thought. Anyway, it's gorgeous. Douglas iris, native thistles, poppies all over the place, berberis. I mean, just really amazing diversity of plants and a lot of work by volunteers. Really amazing.
Great. Thanks, Marguerite. John?
Just real quick, there's an article, if it can be sent from the front page of the Chronicle today, about an efforts on down in Modesto to basically recreate a creek and rivers, and it recharges a groundwater basin, tearing down berms. And it's a great article, and I'd like to maybe see if we can, what we could maybe do in the lower McCullamy, because that's also a groundwater basin that we're going to be using with the San Joaquin County Recharge Group. But this is what we should be doing to recharge our groundwater basins. It's better for the fish, it's better for the environment, and something to, I'd like us, at least we can take a look to see whether it's feasible or not. If not, so be it. But if that can maybe be sent to the entire board, that'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
Anything else from director comments? Okay, then we'll adjourn the meeting. The next meeting of the board will be held Tuesday, May 25th at 1:15 p.m. This meeting is now adjourned.